Hey, we want to welcome everybody to another episode of You and the Law Podcast Show. We want to thank you for taking the time to tune in and join us for another exciting. Well, I'm not going to say exciting. I'm going to say a very informative topic that we're going to be talking about here on You and the Law Podcast Show with my co-host who goes by the name of Chief Humphrey, but he's known all around as Chief Swaggy One. How you doing, brother?
What's up, my brother? How you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. Man, it's always good to be in your presence.
I know.
Always.
I know.
So
Man,
yes, sir.
you're not telling me anything new. I know.
Well, and man, for a brother who has an image of himself behind him, that speaks a lot. Everybody, everybody can't be, you know, Chief Swaggy One.
It's hard, but somebody got to do it, brother.
Yeah, man, it's hard, brother. Hey, let me take something down off the screen here that is not what we're talking about today. We were not on last week, and we've got a topic that we're going to be talking about, Keith. That it, with the elections that's coming up next, what, Tuesday?
Yeah.
uh, Next Tuesday, November the 8th, is the general election, and so um, a lot going on, Keith, that the conversation about how can policing protect the voters who are going to the polls. You got some people, Keith, who are saying that it's an overkill because these things uh, won't happen. They're not happening, and that it's just like here's this group making something out of something that's not going to be anything. But then you hear reports, Keith, about voter intimidation, people showing up to polling places. They're armed and they're in the area where people are standing in line to go and vote. So, and then, Keith, another thing that we're going to be talking about throughout the hour on here on You and the Law Podcast Show, that you've got people in our profession in law enforcement who are inserting themselves into this election because they are on this same path with people who don't believe the election that took place was a legitimate election. And so there's so many things to talk about, Keith, in this next hour, that hopefully those who are tuned in and watching us or and listening to us will share your thoughts and comments in the chat room, and we'll definitely talk about those. But Keith, I think this is going to be interesting to see what happens after January the 6th, how everybody who is got these issues with election deniers, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens uh, next Tuesday, between now and next Tuesday.
So I think it's the unknown, Virgil. I think that you're absolutely right. Do I believe that people will be attacked at the polls?
Intimidated, yeah.
I think the sight of a uniform in the trying times that we're in, when it comes to where people are talking about there's been voters, you know, voting machines have been manipulated, and things haven't been tallied up right, and so now you're talking about different states are passing different rules when it comes to voting, and so I think there is a sense of intimidation when you put a law enforcement officer in uniform there, and there are a lot of municipal law enforcement officers, law enforcement chiefs that will not allow their officers to stand on the grounds of a poll. Now, a lot of those are county facilities. And so, there are those sheriffs that will have people there, and it's for protection and to ensure, but there's some intimidation. There's a fact of intimidation there when you see that uniform. And there are people, especially generational, depending on what generation an individual's from. So there can be. And then when you lump in the fact that there are people who wear the uniform who actually believe that January the 6th was necessary, and they believe that elections have been rigged, why would you not feel intimidated by if you see a uniform at a polling site?
Yeah. Well, Keith, we already got one comment come in from Taisha Swift, who she says, "Hey, it's real on the West Coast, very racist here." And then she says, "If Trump is allowed to run, it's going to be a race war." Uh, Keith, there's a lot of opinions floating around, and there's a lot of things going on in each state. Whether you're on the West Coast in California or up in Portland, Seattle, whether you're in the Midwest or in the South, there is a lot of people. A lot of people want to get out and exercise their right to vote, but then you have groups who are they know that the black votes and the people of color votes is going to really make a difference in this election. And there's been clearly an effort over the last 2 years to suppress how people vote. And so how does police how do you police during these elections? And then you have some states, Keith, who have enacted laws that state that police officers of any uniform are not permitted to be within 100 feet of a polling place.
And I agree with that. I think there should be a layered approach, especially, if you believe or you have gotten intelligence. It's a lot different unless, if you've gotten intelligence that there's going to be some problem at a poll. But at the same time, you're not, with everything that's going on in the nation and with everything that happened, I go back and say, or what happened on January 6th, you just have people who are intimidated. The things that are being said and the actions of a lot of people, I understand what the young lady is saying. It's an unknown when it comes to next year's election, what's going to happen, because you do have individuals that truly believe that the last election was stolen from the person who ran on the Republican ticket. They actually believe that. And so when you actually believe that, when that's in your mind and you eat and sleep and drink that, the conspiracy theorists, what's that saying, Virgil? If you say it enough times, you'll believe it.
Yeah.
And so now that's a very dangerous formula when it comes to white supremacy, when it comes to extremists. And now you're talking about an election of someone who continues to stir the pot. That can be. And I was talking to somebody the other day. I am really, really worried about what's going to happen next year around November, around election time. I'm really, really worried what's going to happen. I'm really worried about next Tuesday. I'm really worried, and it's about the actions of individuals if certain elections or certain spots don't end up the way that they want them to end up, because people are just angry. And I think that's why it's kind of a thin line. Should officers be on scene? Should they not be on scene? But I think every police department in the nation should be on alert and understand and know what the potential is.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. No matter, and again, people got to separate their opinions about their personal opinions about what took place with the previous election and what is going on with this election. And if you're called upon to to provide that extra service of security, so people don't feel intimidated, then you need to police officers need to put their personal opinions aside and do what they're what they took an oath to do, and that is to protect the rights of everybody and uphold the Constitution.
Well, Virgil, let me say this, and that's why I have been a staunch opponent of police organizations supporting candidates. You've got to stay neutral. So when you have organizations or associations, or an organization like the Fraternal Order of Police that come out openly and say they support a candidate. And so now what everybody believes, or what a lot of people then believe, is that you're basically saying law enforcement as a whole supports this individual.
Supports that
Yeah. And so now what you've got is, I'm not going to trust you because this candidate has showed you who he is. This candidate has showed you what he's all about as far as what he believes. Now you're telling me as a law enforcement officer who has sworn to uphold the peace and be neutral and things, now you're saying you side with this individual. And now take that, and now you put a law enforcement officer at a polling site. What do you think? What do you think that's going to be? You stir that up, and what kind of recipe do you think that is?
Well, yeah, you're gonna have people who now they feel that person was placed there for a reason.
And then Virgil, you get to thinking, you still have a generation of citizens, African American citizens and white citizens, who still remember what happened in the 50s and early 60s. They still remember how law enforcement became heavy-handed and abusive, and in some instances people died. So you still have those generations. You still have generational people that grew up in that generation that still have a hard time trusting law enforcement and believe with everything that's going on politically that could possibly happen again.
Yeah.
So
well, you're right. You're right, Keith. And I want to get to a comment that Mike Norris just posted. He says, if there is demonstrable intelligence threats, the officers need to deal with the outer perimeter and the area surrounding the polling places. What occurs inside polling places is a polling worker's problem, responsibility to deal with. Officers should never enter a polling place unless it is a life-threatening situation, which that is true. That is absolutely true. And
never thought I would agree. Never thought I would agree with Mr. Morris, but I totally agree. And that's when I was talking about that layered approach. It's like when there's a protest. You don't automatically send all your heavy equipment up there. It's a layered approach. The intel. This is where we're going to stage. Blah blah blah. So he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
It should be in the hands of those individuals who are required to work that are over the polls, and law enforcement should be a last
resort.
If needed.
Yeah. Hey Keith, we got a question from Taisha. She said, "I got a question, Chiefs. Yes, we are going to need the police at the polls, but if the police are racist, is the police some racist? Is some police that are a part of the Proud Boys? What happens then?" I think she's asking, question is, yeah, the police are needed at the polls, but what if you have some of these police officers who have racist views against people of color? And as we know, we what came out of January the 6th is that this list that came out not so long ago that had a lot of police officers from around the country affiliated with the Proud Boys. So, Taisha, I think, to answer your question, and I know Chief Humphrey will jump in, is that's where the leadership at that police department needs to know their personnel and take steps to make sure that those individuals who don't align with the agency's mission and values, they need to be removed. They don't need to. They need not just the fact that they don't need to be at these polling places, but they need to be removed from the profession altogether. So, but go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, Virgil, and I've said this before, and you've said it before. Waiting till an event like January 6th to occur and then dealing with it makes a police chief complicit to the situation. Those type of incidents, you can't tell me that there aren't signs throughout someone's career. There's signs in the hiring process. There's signs in the academy. There's signs in field training. There's signs on the probationary period. There's signs before you put those sergeant stripes on them. There are things, but what happens a lot of times, chiefs will turn a blind eye to those situations because, you know, some get caught between what a person's First Amendment rights are. And so there are those individuals that chiefs that don't address that. And so then you have those individuals that come out because they feel as though they can do that. It's their rights. And so, but to say all that, to sum it up is those are things that every police chief should be looking for. Every supervisor should be looking for. Associates of these individuals, peers of these individuals should be reporting that also. So it takes everybody to work together in order to address situations when it comes to extremists being inside police departments.
Yeah. Well, you know, Keith, I want to remind everybody you're listening to You and the Law podcast show. We're streaming live on Facebook Live. And if you miss any parts of this broadcast, you can definitely check us out on many podcast platforms, whether it be Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts. We're now on Apple Podcasts, but also, Keith, you know, we were just added to the Amazon Music podcast. So all you need to do is just go to those searches and find our podcast shows there, current podcasts and previous podcasts. But tonight we're talking about policing during the elections, which, you know, is next Tuesday on November the 8th. And Keith, you know, we talked about, you know, we don't really talk about the politics, but we talk about how policing is involved with politics. And, you know, couple of podcast shows previously we talked about, you know, somebody who you like very, you know, I'm not going to say.
Don't bring that dude's name up. I done told you, man. Don't bring that dude's name up, man. You know, I mean,
you know, and I said then, Keith, that not just in Georgia, Keith, people need to get out and vote in your state and make sure if you got friends and family in Georgia that you get out and encourage them to vote, because when you become a senator, you're voting on things that impacts not just people in Georgia, but things that impact in Oklahoma, Arkansas, California, every state. This guy would have a vote, and who has absolutely no clue as to what he is talking about or what he is reading and how he can vote on policies. You and I would be better candidates to run for Senate than that person who.
Hey.
You and I would be better.
Listen. I totally agree, but please don't compare us to him.
I'm not comparing us to him. I'm just saying
that right there that's not making us look good. You compare, but listen, man.
Okay.
You know, there's been a lot of I'm looking at a lot of athletes that have become politicians. You know, I'm looking at Steve Largent. I'm looking at Kemp. I mean, I'm looking at a lot of professional athletes and coaches and things that have become
You remember, there's a coach too.
politician. Absolutely.
But that there's a coach who coached at what's his name? Tuberville.
Tom.
Tuberville, who
Yeah.
unfortunately coached at Texas Tech University football,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now this oh golly, man.
And so it's do I believe that athletes and those individuals who don't have experience in politics that can become amazing? Absolutely, I believe that. But when you have someone that really doesn't understand what's going on, and it goes back to what our topic is tonight. Now you got a guy that says that he is a law enforcement officer or has trained with law enforcement up to the level of the FBI. You put all that together, like I said before, why should people trust police when you have somebody who has said the things that he said, and then you have a sheriff that gets on TV and praises this man. And so I gave him the badge and things like that.
Yeah.
So people don't know who to trust.
No.
It's gotten to the point, man, where it's not about the facts or the people. It's about the ratings. It's about look at me. It's not about those individuals that, I think that there are those politicians that beg for votes and they tell you that they're going to do this. But at the end of the day, they're not supporting their constituents. Yeah. And so it goes back to that stuff makes everybody angry. I'm telling you, man, there's going to be somewhere in the nation, Virgil, there's going to be some type of incident of violence related to voting next Tuesday. And
unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately. And it's not a matter of if, it's just when. And then you're going to see what we're going to see is we're going to see law enforcement rush in. We're going to see some form of force utilized, and then it's going to be a topic on the news Wednesday morning.
Yeah,
because that's just where we are in the nation. We have gotten to the point where law enforcement is involved in every aspect of politics. Law enforcement's involved in every aspect of politics.
Yeah, and you got to be able to separate.
Man, you have to. Yeah. You have to, because it comes down to the point of who do I trust? Why is this person? If this person believes in this person's philosophies, how can I trust them? So it goes back to we have been utilized as a heavy-handed approach in voting, protest, in a lot of civic incidents. We have been people remember that. And then when you think about it, Virgil, the Voting Rights Act, man, it's not old, man.
No.
It's not old.
No, it's not.
And people remember. People remember.
Exactly. Hey, Keith, Veronica Ferguson, she said it was Tommy Tuberville. He was the former Auburn University head coach and also former head coach at Texas Tech University. So, and again, Keith, I'm going to use J.C. Watts as an example. A lot of people may or may not know of the name J.C. Watts. He's a former congressman from Oklahoma, Republican, played football at the University of Oklahoma, served as a corporation commissioner, got involved in politics after his career in football. But he is somebody who has not went down that path that you see other Black politicians, either current or former, following down this path with the former president. You've got what's the brother from South Carolina? Is it Tim Scott or?
Say, man.
What?
You're just gonna keep on bringing.
What?
You're gonna bring these guys up that stir up the pot.
Well, I'm what I'm saying is you got somebody like J.C. Watts, who right now he's a Republican, but he is supporting a Democrat candidate that's running for governor in Oklahoma. And so he's not putting himself over here with Trump because he knows that's not where he came from. And this man does not uh, have the same values that he has. But you've got other black men who are in politics who will sell their soul to the devil just to stand alongside him. And so you got these two guys who, once again, they don't have the best interest for the black community. They have their best interest for whatever they're trying to get out of it because somebody says, hey, why don't you move from Texas and go to Georgia and we're going to make sure that you become a senator.
Well, is it out of fear? Is it out of looking to make a name, or why? I mean, my question about this is, Virgil, getting back on that topic that we, what our topic is, what does that person bring to the table? Does that person incite incidents? Does he cause voters who are African American and voters who are white to clash at polls? Because right now you have individuals that, I mean, some of the things that he has said, he receives applause at those events.
Yeah,
which I'm telling you, there are those individuals on both sides that they're so in this election. These elections are so intense and so important that they don't have a problem throwing hands. They don't have a problem, fighting. They don't have a problem cursing each other, screaming and yelling outside those polls. And that's what I'm talking about. When you get into that type of situation, sometimes law enforcement is forced into it. And I don't think people understand that. And I don't think people see that. In these situations, we shouldn't be involved in voting. We shouldn't be anywhere near the polls other than a support, as support. But when you have everything as contentious as it is right now, and you have people, no matter what a person says, it's wrong. You don't have the right to believe in who you want to. And if you do believe in it, you're wrong. You're the devil. You're non-American. People are going to clash.
Yeah.
Then we have to go and we have to separate. Then we have to go in and try to fix it. Yeah. But it's just the fact of the matter, man. It is just tense times in the nation. I don't foresee the times getting any easier or any less tense.
No, because we got a presidential election coming up.
I think it's going to be really bad. I do, and I fear for the American citizens because we don't know what's going. We are in a process where these elections have become violent.
Yeah, Keith, and our tonight's topic is policing during the elections. And, we got another comment from Mike Norris who says all sheriffs are politicians by the fact that they are elected. Many of them are disgraced. You might be surprised at the number of former retired LEOs are elected to political office. Just because they are former retired officers does not disqualify them from running or holding political office. I mean, you're right. I mean, I ran for political office, but I'm going to say this. I ran not as a politician, but as a black man running for Oklahoma County Sheriff. You got to be able to separate that, Keith, into those who are listening. You got to be able to separate yourself from the politics and run for sheriff. And I've said this. If you're running for sheriff, the politics needs to be removed from that, because Keith, as I saw recently in one of Trump's, wherever he was at, there was a bunch of guys standing behind him with shirts and and cowboy hats on with badges and guns on. And these are these election deniers who are elected sheriffs. People got to realize on a county level, sheriff, they are the chief law enforcement officer of that county. So can you imagine having a sheriff come in and say, I'm going to close down this polling place, or I'm going to put a deputy here and certain things happen because I've got the political power to do so? So that's why people who run for sheriff should not be running as a Democrat or as a Republican. It just needs to be open.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, Virgil. My personal belief is that any law enforcement position should not be an elected position.
No, and you know what, Keith? There are some police chiefs in some cities or towns in Oklahoma that are elected positions. It's very rare, but you do see that in on the level of being police chiefs.
There were two in the state of Texas, and one in San Angelo. I think the other one that changed the charter was chiefs appointed. But I know San Angelo was one where the chief was elected. So think about that, man. You know, that is. I mean, how can you trust law enforcement when a person, because when you listen, this is what you got to understand. Everybody has a right to be whatever political party they want. They want to be. That's their right. But when you think about it, when you say that you're a Republican, or when you say you're a Democrat, and you know, for instance, you say you're Republican, and the sheriff is Republican, and they're bringing in these politicians that have these whatever the beliefs are, or they say, well, he was endorsed by Trump. Then you have people that believe that person cannot deliver quality, impartial, unbiased
police
law enforcement.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer that there should be no law enforcement position in the United States that is elected. And you're also correct that it shouldn't be that I'm going to run for an office, be over a law enforcement agency, and I'm going to be a Republican or I'm going to be a Democrat.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we've gotten to the point now, man, where even mayors, the mayoral races
are very political.
They're not supposed to be Democrat or Republican, but it's gotten to that point.
Yeah.
And so that's man, I think a lot of that is causing problems. You know, those certain jobs, certain positions should not be affiliated with politics.
Well, and Keith, even with school board positions, you got school board positions where you've got people who are running to be elected on the school board who are spending upwards over $100,000 and more, or close to $500,000 to run for school boards. You got people who are running for mayor who are spending, who are raising over $10 million, $20 million just to run for mayor. And that position only pays less than, in some cities, maybe less than $20,000 a year. And in some cities don't even pay that. So, yeah. And so, Mike makes a comment about most DAs run as political candidates, but some use the political party as a tool to win. He said, Keith, if that is your point of view, what you say about the selection of sheriffs? I guess that's let me put this up. There you go. So
I think any law enforcement, any position that fits in the three prongs of the criminal justice, whether it's police, whether it's judicial, whether it's detention, I don't believe any of those positions should be elected positions. I do not.
Well, and Keith,
Virgil, let's think about this. District attorneys run based on incumbent district attorneys run based on their prosecution rate. They've run based on the fact that we have 92. I have 92%, prosecution rate. Well, what a lot of citizens don't understand, a prosecution is a deferred adjudication, a plea bargain. That's all considered prosecutions. And I say it's just very difficult. I mean, what does law enforcement and politics, what does that look like in the nation right now? I'm telling you, what does that look like? When you have a politician or you have an organization that has Chicago Police Department. Chicago has 15,000 law enforcement officers. And so when and we know that the FOP is the bargaining unit for the Chicago Police Department.
Correct.
And so then when you get up and you stand up with a political candidate, you're saying that your organization, you're saying that the entire Chicago Police Department organization, officers, support this candidate. Then as a citizen, it scares me to death, because now what if this candidate believes in, well, you should kick them in the butt. You should shoot everybody. If they don't do this, put them in jail, no matter what they do.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that? So now, we're going to enforce the law of the land. I had a supervisor tell me one day that it is our responsibility to enforce every law of the land. No, it's not. We're local municipal officers. We're not federal officers.
Yeah. And you don't even have federal. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't. As local law enforcement, we don't have the authority to enforce everything. And so that's why we have to be completely out of the political part of it. We have to. We don't need to go to rallies. We don't need to put signs in the yards, things like that, because we got to stay neutral.
Well, yeah, and I think, Keith, you made a comment earlier that I'm going to circle back around to, when you have police unions who come out and endorse candidates for governors, or endorse candidates for DAs, or where there's a clear, to me, a conflict of interest there, and now every person who is a part of that union, FOP union, they may not agree. And we saw this with the last election, where a group of Black police officers, I want to say was, I don't know, Chicago, Detroit, somewhere, where that union came out and endorsed Trump. And you had the Black police officers who did something that they traditionally probably wouldn't have done, came out and said, no, that's not how we feel. So how can you say that we are, as a whole, are voted for you to endorse this man? And so there was a division between Black officers and white officers. And that's another reason why FOP should not come out and endorse people for governors or people for presidents. But we have seen this happen, Keith, more in the last 10 years, where these police unions are coming out in much more openness to endorse candidates, especially for those two high positions within government, as a governor or even as the president.
But Bert, and to the listeners out there, it's just like an HOA, homeowners association. You might not like the rules, but at the end of the day, your money is paying to be used. So it's the same thing with, and I've always told people that if you don't agree with what goes on in an association or a union, then you have options, and the options is to get out. And I know people who have removed themselves from unions based on, some of them, just those type of things. They feel like the unions are too political. I mean, you're bringing in politicians to your meetings. You are escorting politicians, things like that. And I'm not talking about part of your duties if it's a safety issue, but you're having, you're going to luncheons and stuff. So it does send a bad message. It sends a horrible message to our communities that we can be bought, the fact that we aren't impartial. And so, yeah, there's gonna be some fear. Absolutely, there's gonna be that fear when you see a law enforcement officer near a um, polling location, voting location. Yeah, there's gonna be some fear. And so we definitely, I'll say this again, we definitely have to remove ourselves from that situation because it can become volatile. It can become very volatile. The situation now over the last 6 years is already volatile.
Yeah.
And so now you throw in law enforcement to have a big presence at a polling location. Um, that in itself is just that's not a good mix.
No, it's not, Keith. And I think, whether it's going to be the day of the election, early voting has started in so many states. And obviously, everybody will get out to the polls and vote on, next Tuesday, January the 8th. And Keith, something just crossed my mind and, share with you and our listeners that, I think I heard that there has probably been over close to 23, 24 million people have already cast their ballots across the country. And you got people who are saying, well, nothing happened with those 23 million people. You're absolutely right. Those people went and voted earlier. They may not, but you've heard situations where people felt that there was some type of intimidation going on there. And I think it's going to be state by state. I think you got states like Arizona where there's a lot of controversy going on. There's states like down in South in Georgia, in other states. So it's going to be something how each state deals with that concern with people feeling safe to go to polls, and what plan does the local police department have to address situations where if you got somebody who is set up, multiple people who are set up around a polling location and they're armed with weapons, how does law enforcement, how does police officers respond to that? And I'm going to ask this question to you and those who are listening, and put your comments in the chat room. What if you are a police officer and you respond to one of these calls, and here is somebody that you are friends with, or may even be a police officer from a neighboring jurisdiction? How are you going to handle that situation?
That's a good question. I mean, I hope that you're going to be able to communicate with that individual, and it's always about the discussion. The being professional and being able to de-escalate. Unfortunately, there are times when that doesn't work, and so I really just don't know about how that can happen. Because I'm telling you, when a person gets it in their mind that that's their right, sometimes it's very difficult to change that mindset. And so the more a person believes they have the right to do that, the more intense they get. And the more intense they get, then the more the probability of there being some type of force used by law enforcement if they're called into the situation. So I don't know, Virgil. I don't know. I think it just depends on the two individuals. It depends on that officer, and it depends on that individual who is the officer's responding to.
Yeah. Hey, Keith, we got a couple of comments in the chat room. I want to get to Tony Hollis. He says, I've been reading about cowards showing up at ballot drops off, and then not to mention federal judges are part of the mess, and law enforcement as well. The only way he says this crap is going to stop is when black militants show up as well. And if this happens, people will harm, if not kill. I just don't, believe in you're escalating a situation instead of de-escalating a situation. I think you need to do everything you can to keep things at a level where it doesn't rise to to where people are showing up with arms and they're becoming where some innocent people are going to get seriously injured. So let me.
But I
Go
think
ahead.
we're in the point. I think we're at that point in the nation where you are seeing individuals who are maybe considered militant that are coming to those polling areas now. I know in the state, in a lot of the states, it is against the law to have a weapon on at a polling site.
Mhm.
However, doesn't say anything. I mean, I think there's a proximity, but it doesn't say anything about being near that location, and so now the fact of the matter is you have that anger, you have that weapon, and in some cases you have somebody who may have been drinking. I'll tell you where the location that I'm really scared about, and I'm really concerned is Georgia, because
But Georgia and Arizona,
say if Stacey Abrams wins and the pastor wins, Warnock.
Warnock.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of controversy because people are going to believe that those races were rigged, and there's going to be a lot of anger. And I'm telling you, protest. And here we go now. Who comes in and monitors the protest or have to deal with irate protesters? Law enforcement.
Law enforcement. Yeah. Hey, Keith, I want to get to another comment. Mike Norris says, I'm going to clear. This goes back to the question I just asked. He says that he would clear the polling places at the end of the day. Those folks are going to leave one way or another. We got another comment here I want to get to from Pamela Humphrey, who says, I don't think there are many elected officials who can truly be partisan. That ship sailed
Bipartisan.
That ship sailed when you know who took office in 2017. We haven't seen this type of climate since the Jim Crow and civil rights era in this country. Funny how we experienced, and I think there were some other parts of that's not sure. Funny how we're experiencing voter intimidation post who. Keith, you have to ask yourself this question. Are we going back to 1950s and 60s?
Absolutely.
Instead of moving forward.
Absolutely. Look at some of the laws that are being passed. Look at some of the cases that the Supreme Court are hearing. Look at that. Did you know here in the state of Tennessee that if you are a pastor, you can't run for a state office?
Is that a state law?
That's a state law. You can't run for a state office if you are a minister. And so there's a lot of African American ministers in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
I truly believe that we are going back. I mean, just look at what's going on in the nation.
I don't think we had, Keith, and not to cut you off, I don't think that a law existed like that during Jim Crow or back in did such law exist back in the 60s and 70s that said if you were a pastor in Tennessee that you couldn't run for office?
I don't know how long that's been on the books, but they're trying to repeal it next Tuesday, and so yes, we're going backwards. I mean, no matter what people think. I mean, if people just are realistic, let's be realistic. Absolutely, we're going back, Virgil. I mean, I'll say that look at the court cases the Supreme Court's hearing now. Look at the violence and the protest and the what's going on with Twitter when you have over 500%. The use of the N-word has gone up over 500% since Elon Musk took over Twitter. Yes, it is. This is an angry nation. This is a nation where everything is racial. It is, and people are just angry. Nobody trusts anybody anymore. And so it is absolutely. And I will have that debate with anyone regarding that, because just look at what's going on. Have things changed for minorities, African Americans? Yeah, there's been some changes, but what I will tell you is that when you're an African American and you are especially head of a law enforcement agency, I truly believe that there's a playbook that has been written by the FOP to how to give a police executive, an African American police executive, how to give them hell. I truly believe that. And so, yeah, we're going
because
back. We've never had as many African American police chiefs in the nation that we have now. But then we've never had as many African American, but then those African American police chiefs are facing so much resistance and things like that. So yeah, we're going back. We're going back in this election this weekend, next week, and the presidential election is going to determine the trajectory of this nation and what's going to happen with race relations.
Well, Keith, and I want to say this because we're coming up on the last minutes of the podcast show, and this is why it's important. Tonight we're talking about policing during the elections. People need to understand that, and I think there's a lot of intelligent people who watch our podcast show, listen to this podcast show, but your local elections are just as important as these national elections are, because you have people who are getting into positions such as Secretary of States, or they are in charge of how ballots are counted. And so when you put people in positions who have an agenda, and now you've got people who are saying, well, now my vote really doesn't count. Now those people are discouraging people, especially minorities, to get out and vote, because they feel like, well, there's people that's being put in places to stop the democratic process of voting. And so that's why I've always said that's why it's really important for young people to be taught by their parents, their grandparents, the importance of going and voting for your mayors, voting for your city council people, voting for your state representative, your senators, your congressmen, and your presidents, because that vote counts. And some votes, Keith, as you know, have, if maybe 10 people got out and voted, maybe the right person would have gotten elected.
I've seen elections decided by single digit
one vote
votes. People don't believe it. I'm going to say this as we're getting close to wrapping up. If the blood of John Lewis and others on Bloody Sunday, if that is not ingrained in the heads or the minds of American people, especially African American people, of what people had to go for, which our generation before us had to go through to push a button, to sign a ballot. If you can't see that some of those things have the potential of coming back, then there's a problem.
Yeah,
there is a problem, because I remember watching elections when it was, people are telling you what they really, really want to do, and we support the police and equipment, and we support it in better training and more money. But when you get to the point of you telling your constituents that we support the police to utilize, because they need to utilize more force, then that's a problem. That's scary, and it's something that we got to be really, really careful. It's a shame people have to be careful when they go to vote. It's a
Yeah.
shame. It's a shame
Well,
people have to worry about being taunted or worried about being assaulted when they go to vote. But if you can't see that we're going backwards to those times and our voting rights are being messed with and things like that, then man, we're blind.
Yeah, we are. Hey, Keith, I want to get to this. Yeah, this last comment before we get, we got about 3 minutes. Tony Hollis says the Justice Department is doing the same thing when they had credible information before January the 6th. I think he, basically saying, once again, here we are seeing law enforcement, DOJ kind of sit on their hands when there's credible information about the potential for violence. And so, Tony, I hope that many are learned from what took place back in January, that it doesn't take place with the elections that's coming up.
I don't think we can prevent that. I don't think we can be optimistic, man. I just think with these local elections, as heated as it is in Georgia and Alabama, people are watching as heated as some of these local elections are. I look at Little Rock. It is probably one of the most heated in the nation, and it's all about race. It is simply all about race. And then we go into next year because people don't realize the election year starts January 1st. Although people say it starts a little bit later, it started now already.
Yeah.
These elections coming up are going to set the tone for the election year next year.
Yeah.
But they're already in motion, but January 1st is the year that we elect our next president.
Congress.
We either re-elect or we elect a new one.
Yeah.
And there's so many unknowns, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, Keith. And I think, again, I want to remind, those who are listening to the podcast, tonight's topic is policing during the elections. And, if you miss any parts of this live broadcast as we stream live on Facebook Live and LinkedIn, and also we're streaming live on our YouTube channel on You and the Law Podcast Show. You can check us out on our YouTube channel, or you can check us out on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and now, Keith, you can follow us on Amazon Music Podcast. And so it was, we're
doing big things.
Man, we are. So it goes to show you that, and also, Keith, we are one of the top 10 law enforcement podcasts that has been named. So, the topics that we have are very informative topics, and that's what we try to do every week, is come up with topics. And so obviously next Thursday, we're going to be probably talking about what happened after the election and what went right and what didn't go right with law enforcement during policing during the election. So,
I will tell you, Virgil, over the next year, law enforcement is going to be extremely busy.
Yeah.
If nothing else, supporting federal agencies in the protection of candidates for whether it's state or federal positions. Law enforcement is going to be extremely busy, and it's very easy for us to get caught up in the politics if we're not careful.
Yeah. Well, hey, Keith, brother, man, it's been a great podcast episode with you again, man. Always.
Well, man, it's good to see you, man. And, as always, brother, I love you, man. And, to our listeners, get out and vote. That's the only thing I can say. Get out and vote. Whoever your choice is, at least get out and vote.
Yeah. And tune in next Thursday, streaming live on Facebook Live at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time for another episode of You and the Law Podcast Show.